Welcome to episode 60 of Game of Thrones Abridged on Alt Swift X, the only show with a 100% tangent-free guarantee. Every episode has been carefully examined, hand-picked for minimal tangents and maximum efficiency. That's what this show is known for. It's for keeping on the tracks. And this is a special episode somewhat. It's a milestone. It's got a 0 on the end. 60 episodes. That's a big number. That makes us a sextagenarian or a something, you know? I'm not sure how the numbers work, but 60 is a big, nice, round one. So let's all be pleased about that. Time, yeah, there seems to be some time confusion. Time's always going to be a bit wibbly-wobbly, we know that. Sometimes things will start or end a little bit early or on time. It's Alt Swift X. Sometimes these things happen. Sometimes they don't happen. Sometimes they happen early. We'll just roll with it. We'll keep on rolling on. Welcome everybody to the stream. So today we're reading Catelyn 9, A Game of Thrones. And this is a relatively longish chapter, and this is where we get to meet everyone's favorite characters, the Freys, the most beloved family in Westeros, surely, certainly one of the largest. All of the big Freys and the little Freys and the Freylets and the Wolders and the Woldars and the Wolders. So it'll be fun to meet them. Thank you very much, Shrimp99991, for your very kind donation. Thank you and enjoy the stream. And again, so the system we'll use is that donations will be acknowledged generally at the end of the stream. So any questions, anything you want addressed, we can get to that at the end of the stream. But thank you, Mr. Shrimp. We've got so much seafood in the comments, don't we? Because we've got Hairless Oyster, the inimitable Oyster himself, and now I've also got a shrimpy fellow in the chat as well. So welcome all seafood-related creatures to this wonderful stream. So the chapter begins with an army and a causeway. Well, it's a host. The term used is host. The host troops is what the host does. It's a funny little linguistic thing that a host can troop, but a troop can also host. A host can troop and a troop can host. How many hosts would a troop host if a host troop could troop hosts? And how many troops would a host troop host if a host troop could troop hosts? These are important questions we need to answer, I think. But the point is that this is Robb Stark's army. Robb Stark's army, the gathered banners of the North marching south to deal with Ned's imprisonment and all of that nonsense. And one of the things that they need to do in order to get to the south is to cross Walder Frey's bridge. I mean, there's actually this sort of military strategy that Robb has devised, wherein Robb's army will be splitting in two. Roose Bolton is heading off to the east, while Robb Stark goes more to the west, and he needs to cross this bridge, which means he needs to persuade the Freys. Frey persuasion is what's needed here, and as Catelyn will learn, it gets tricky. But Catelyn has apprehensions. Catelyn's apprehensions grow. You'd think that her apprehensions had grown about as large as apprehensions could, but Catelyn's apprehensions are the little apprehensions that could. They just keep on trucking, keep on growing, blossoming into a great, glorious, growing tree that just keeps on growing. It's like what's that kind of tree that just... Or is it dragons? Which one's the one that keeps on growing indefinitely until it's dead? That is dragons, isn't it? I don't think there's a kind of tree that does that. Is there... Question for the comments. Are there any animals or creatures in the real world that keep growing indefinitely until they just die? There's probably something. I mean, I guess you could argue that, like, certain kinds of moss just sort of do that, but that's because they're they're collectively a bunch of different organisms. Because I mean, theoretically, if you gave moss enough space, it would just take over the world, right? It would just grow over every surface, right? But I guess that's not strictly one organism strictly. Rasheen, I don't think elephants. I'm pretty sure elephants stop growing at some point, because otherwise we would be full of gigantic elephants roaming the savannah, wouldn't we? Coral, yeah, maybe coral is one of those. Coral is weird, because isn't coral technically like one organism in some sense? Yeah, fungi, rock lobsters apparently. Not sure, but the analogy here is, of course, Catelyn's apprehension, Catelyn's anxiety, Catelyn's concern, because right now pretty much every member of Catelyn's family is in some kind of spot of bother or other. Every member of Catelyn's family is having a bit of trouble right now, and Catelyn, as the matriarch of the Stark family, is feeling the pressure, feeling the concern, feeling the anxiety of her family being scattered, because her father, Hoster Tully, hasn't been heard from. She hasn't heard from her father, and it's ominous that it seems to be her brother Edmure who's running things in Riverrun rather than her father. So she's concerned about Hoster, and she's of course very concerned about Edmure having to deal with Jaime Lannister. The Kingslayer is who's been fighting Edmure around Riverrun, and not to disparage Edmure, but by reputation, he might not be up to the task of dealing with Jaime Lannister. So Catelyn prays that he will, that the gods will watch over Edmure if he must face the Kingslayer, because Edmure will probably need some divine intervention if he's to survive the Kingslayer. And she fears for her husband Neddard down in the dungeon, and she fears for her girls Sansa and Arya, and she fears for her sons Bran and Rickon, who she left behind at Winterfell. But she figures there's nothing she can do for them, so she's got to focus on supporting Robb, because Robb is her son, who is actually with her and who she can actually emotionally support. So Catelyn's doing the very, very rational, sensible thing of going like, all right, I can't worry about the people who I can't help right now. I can only just do my best as to support what's in front of me. No point worrying about what I can't control. It sounds like Catelyn's been doing some quality CBT. She's been trying to think clear-headedly about her anxieties and emotions and trying to direct them in a constructive manner. But yes, let's keep this speeding train keeping on going as we blaze our way over to the second page. So one of the other interesting things that goes on in Catelyn's head is her whole dichotomy between her Tully identity and her Stark identity. That's especially something for the women in this chapter, because the men generally keep their surnames when they get married. They keep their existing family identity generally, whereas the female characters who get married off to lords and stuff, they take the name of their new family. They're expected to become loyal and to become a part of this new group, but at the same time they inevitably have some level of loyalty to their old family. So Catelyn is both a Stark and a Tully, a wolf and a fish, a little catfish. And so Catelyn's thinking, all right, I've got to become Stark-like in order to handle the shit that's going on around me. I must be a Stark. I must be hard and cold as the North, as fierce and hard as the North, in order to survive here. So she's taking on a Stark identity, but she's heading into the Riverlands, which is her place of birth, Riverrun, with her family, the Tullys. So there's a bit of a juggling of loyalties here. I mean, fortunately, the Tullys and the Starks are more or less on the same side in this particular war, but there are certainly many other situations, like Theon Greyjoy, whose loyalties get torn, which is painful. So the Blackfish is about Brynden Tully. He's a man who you want on your side when shit goes sour. It was kind of awkward in Game of Thrones Season 6 when they tried to go, hey, the Blackfish, This guy is pretty cool. Oh, by the way, yeah, so people are bringing up in the comments the fact that, like, Cersei uses her Lannister identity a lot, as opposed to a Baratheon identity. I think that's to do with, like, her being married to a king, because I believe that what generally happens is that when you marry a king, there's an exception to that usual rule of taking their name. Apparently, when you marry the king and become a queen, you always keep your old family name. So, like, Elia, or like I guess Elia Martell if Rhaegar became king. But the point is, like, if you marry the king, you keep your old family name. So Cersei remained Cersei Lannister. She didn't become Cersei Baratheon by marrying the king. And apparently that's a rule that just is a thing in this particular version of feudalism. You never take the royal family name by marrying. I think that's the rule. Someone correct me if that's wrong. But anyway, the Blackfish. The Blackfish. Is around. The Blackfish is inbound. The Blackfish is taking matters into hand. And yeah, it was kind of lame in Game of Thrones Season 6 when they introduced the Blackfish, or rather they reintroduced the Blackfish and were like, hey, this guy's super cool. You remember him, all of his daring exploits, when, he only really turned up for like 20 minutes in Game of Thrones Season 4 or whatever, or Season 3 or something. And yet everyone was expected to go like, wow, the Blackfish, isn't he an impressive fellow? Shouldn't we care about everything that happens to him in Game of Thrones Season 6? 90% of viewers don't remember who Brynden Blackfish was. Which is why I think a lot of his involvement in the Riverrun storyline in Game of Thrones Season 6 was a bit of a letdown. People didn't know who he was or care who he was, because the Blackfish was excluded from a lot of this early, like, Season 1 stuff. That he's involved in the books. He's not introduced until later. And of course, it's fair enough that the show had to cut some of the more minor characters. But if you're going to reintroduce him later on, his character would have been much more impactful if we'd remembered him from earlier exploits. Because the Blackfish is pretty much a badass by most accounts. And we certainly get some nods to his competency, his proficiency, in this chapter. So Bryndon's been riding around. He's been, like, scouting, leading some riders. And they're a bit concerned because Walder Frey, Lord of the Twins of the Crossing, has assembled a force, an army of 4,000 men at his castle, and that's where Robb wants to cross. And Catelyn curses Walder Frey and says he's late again. Because Walder is a lord of the river. He's a lord of the river lords. He's in River Town. He's in the lands of the rivers, which means he's sworn to Hoster Tully. He's sworn to the Tullys, and he should support the Tullys when the Tullys call their banners and ask everyone to join up. Because Edmure Tully had gone, yo, all right, Tullys, we're doing the thing. You all need to come up and, like, help us defend the Riverlands against Tywin, who's attacking us. And Walder Frey failed to do that. Walder Frey failed to come and support Edmure and the Tullys with the force they were putting against the Lannisters. Instead, they've just gathered their swords and stayed at the Twins. So Walder has been late to arrive to that particular battle, just as he was late to Robert's Rebellion. He didn't turn up at the Battle of the Trident until it was already over. So Walder has a reputation for tardiness, for truancy, for not turning up when he's expected. He is the late Walder Frey. But what Catelyn doesn't understand is that a Walder is never late, but arrives precisely when he means to. So let's keep that in mind. So Walder is late, and Robb is like, really? Like, is this really how Walder's gonna play it? Like, he's meant to be fighting for the Tullys. He's meant to be fighting for the Riverruns. Can we really not rely on him supporting us? But everyone's basically like, yeah, no, some men take their oaths more seriously than others, Robb. And they note that Walder has been quite friendly with Casterly Rock, with the Westerlands, and one of his sons is wed to Tywin Lannister's sister, that's Jenna Lannister. And there are lots of unsettling connections between Walder and the Lannisters. pretty consistently from pretty early on, it's suggested explicitly that, do you think Walder means to betray us to the Lannisters, my lady? Robert Glover asks gravely. So we are very, very directly raised the possibility of the idea that maybe Walder would betray Robb to the Lannisters, and of course that's what ends up happening with the Red Wedding. So you can't complain about like, oh, there was no foreshadowing, I didn't see it coming, it's plot twist. Like, that's not the case. We're told pretty clearly, pretty early on, that Walder is not to be trusted, and specifically may betray us to the Lannisters. Robb really should have seen that foreshadowing coming. When foreshadowing happens in your own life, when someone comes up to you and says, hey, I think there's about to be some kind of a global financial crisis. I think maybe someone, some kind of political tumult might happen. Some kind of a vote might go awry. Some kind of a cub might win some kind of a World Cup. Some kind of a shit might be about to happen. You've got to trust those signs and portents, because of course you are the protagonist of your own story, and if you mean to survive your own story, you've got to do two things. One, you've got to hope that George Martin isn't writing your story, because he's about to cut your fucking head off. But two, you've got to keep an eye out for the foreshadowing, right? One eye on the author, one eye on the foreshadowing, so you can dip, duck, dive, and dodge whenever life throws obstacles at you, whenever there's a gnarly plot twist, a hairpin turn that threatens to throw you off the road. You've got to keep the tracks on the train. You've got to bolt those things on. You got to keep those babies fucking rolling. That's what you gotta do in order to prevent any kind of locomotive catastrophe. That's what we're going for. So let's keep this locomotive catastrophe rolling, and we will continue with Catelyn saying, I don't think Walder Frey even knows what Walder Frey wants to do, to be honest. Like, we know that he's cunning, we know he's ambitious, we know that he's cautious and defensive, but I don't think he even has a plan at this point, which only makes him more fucking terrifying. Walder Frey just fucking makes it up as he goes along, but he's also a really unpleasant, vindictive, jealous, nasty little Freylet. So he's not to be trusted, and that's really the most dangerous kind of adversary, is one who doesn't even quite know what he's doing until he does it. There's remember that great bit in I think The Dark Knight, whatever Batman movie it was, where the Joker is like, he's wearing like the nurse hospital outfit, and he's like going around like popping people's heads off and blowing up hospitals and stuff, and he goes up to like Two-Face McGee or whatever the fuck, and he's like, look at me. I can't do the voice. Do I look like a man with a plan? Do I look like I engage in organizational behavior? Do I have an agenda and a flow chart to precisely map out the chronology of my future plans? Do I look like a man who engages in such behavior? Like, that's what the Joker says. And he's trying to come across as like, oh, I just make it up as I go along. I'm just a force of chaos. I just improvise, man. I'm like jazz. The Joker's shenanigans. I'm just like Miles Davis. I'm just like a doobity doop. I'm just making it up as I go along. But hold on, like the Joker has some of the most convoluted scenes in recent cinema. Some of the plots, some of the schemes are ridiculous. Like the thing where he gets like the boat with the bomb with the prisoners, and then the other boat with the other folks, but secretly the bat is actually upside down and they're wearing the masks because of and then he put the mobile phone inside the guy's chest in the jail, and then the lady had the gas and the petrol to explode at the same. Are you saying that he did all that without any planning? That's absurd. He claims to be a force of chaos, of improvisation, but I don't think any of the things that he does could be pulled off by pure improvisation alone. So maybe Walder Frey is the same. Maybe Walder Frey wants to be known as a force of chaos when he's actually a schemer like the Joker. Maybe. Of course, Littlefinger is the other ostensible force of chaos in the series. in the show at least, he very explicitly is all about, like, yo, I just love a bit of chaos, a bit of disorder, Captain Disorder. I just love smushing stuff up, and it leads to my benefit. But of course, in that case as well, we can question whether it's true, whether pure chaos is how Littlefinger or Walder operates, or whether there's a bit more planning going on. But yes, the point is that there is a lot of doubt over Walder Frey's loyalty. But Rob's like, well, we've got to do it. We've got to get across this bridge one way or another. There's this big old river. You can't go over it. You can't go under it. You can't go around it. Better go through Walder Frey's bridge. That's the only option at this point. So they've got to seduce the Frey into letting them across somehow. And yeah, so they're at like the southern edge of the neck, and they're heading towards the Twins is sort of where they are at this point. Which, by the way, is kind of close to where Stoneheart does some shenanigans later on. Kind of close to the Stoneheart situation, because you know how Lady Stoneheart, like Catelyn, after she dies and then is resurrected, she's mentioned going to a place called Hagsmire, and then north of Hagsmire up into the neck. It seems as though Stoneheart went at least near or into the neck after her death and resurrection, which is interesting because at that point Stoneheart has the dead King Rob's crown, and in the neck is Howland Reed and supposedly Major Mormont and Galbert Glover, who know about Rob's will with Jon Snow. So go watch the Grand Northern Conspiracy video on this little YouTuber called Alt Shift X. Overrated, fake news Alt Shift X. But there's a video on that channel about the Grand Northern Conspiracy, and Stoneheart may be involved in it. And this right now is Catelyn's proximity to the neck right now, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, so Brynden is doing his thing. He's scouting. He's preventing information from getting out about Rob's movements. They're trying to prevent Tywin Lannister from moving about Rob's movements. And we get a bit of hashtag information warfare, man. We get a bit of cyber warfare. We get a bit of spies and shenanigans and secrets is what's going on. This is like Cold War shit because, of course, everyone thinks that wars are about, swords and force and stuff, right? When in actual fact, sometimes information comes down to it. I mean, people always joke about military intelligence. Is military intelligence an oxymoron? Maybe. But the point is that information is important in war. So Rob is attempting to keep the knowledge of his movements secret from Tywin Lannister, because what he's doing is actually a bit of a feint. This episode is sponsored by Alt Shift X, of course. And Rob's trying to pull off like a little 1-2 punch. It's like in basketball where you fake right and drive left, right? That's what Rob's trying to pull off with Tywin. So he's trying to prevent him from finding out what's going on. But it's interesting because this is like a long time ago, right? This particular documentary series, A Game of Thrones, it takes place in approximately 1600 AD. They haven't invented emails yet. They're still using the hello rocks. They're still using very old-fashioned technology. In this case, they're using ravens carrying messages is the main way that information moves around in some of these situations. And so the way you can prevent information getting out is by shooting the ravens, which is hilarious. You can get a bow and shoot an arrow into a bird to prevent the bird getting out and the message getting out, and that's how cyber warfare works now. People are always talking about information warfare, like all this shit with like the Middle East and like terrorism, and people are talking about how the internet and communications and propaganda and ideas, it's a war of ideas as opposed to a war of guns and bombs. And so just like with that, information is significant here, but in this case it's rather easier. Yeah, indeed, Kerry Noir. These ravens are getting hacked, and the most effective way to hack a bird is with an arrow launched out of a bow. So that is what Brynden Blackfish does to prevent Rob's movements getting out to Tywin. Cyber warfare. So Brynden is very competent, and Brynden is basically handling shit. So Brynden is a top bloke who we should all like, is what this page is basically trying to say. By the way, Walder Frey has been fighting the Lannisters a bit, so his loyalties are a bit suspect, but like the Lannisters have been like attacking his lands a bit, and the Freys have been defending their lands from the Lannisters. So they have been fighting against the Lannisters to some extent. So it's not like he's like totally obviously just joined the Lannister side or anything. But yeah, as Munashimaru points out, the Weirwood network is the much better analogy to the internet in Westeros. The old gods are very fascinating and very strange. Why is Connor Marion counting with weird numbers? But the Weirwoods seem to be like an internet. They're like a distributed consciousness of trees, which is very similar to George Martin's short story called Song for Leah, where he has like this alien distributed consciousness psychic network thing, which is a whole bunch of different flavors of creepy in its own right. You all should read A Song for Leah, or we should do an alt Swift reading of A Song for Leah at some point. That would be cool. So Brynden Blackfish is being a Blackfish. Walder Frey has been fighting the Lannisters, and Robb is like, I need to cross that bridge somehow. And Walder Frey is like, and Theon's like, all right, well, look, if we have to, if Walder doesn't want to play ball, we'll just fucking take his castle. We'll just kill his blokes, and we'll fight our way through if we have to. Look how many bloody Northerners we've got. We've got this massive army. Let's just fight our way through if we have to. And Theon's like, yeah, it'll be easy. And Catelyn's like, not really. Like, it'd take some time to besiege the twins. And in the time that it takes, Tywin Lannister would just come up our ass and phrasing. Tywin Lannister would just turn up and attack us from behind. And so Robb is like, oh, well, what am I bloody gonna do? What would my father do? So Robb is very much a student of the Ned Stark school of politics, the Ned Stark school of getting shit done, which is perhaps unfortunate. We've got some lines, I'm not sure where it is. There was a line earlier about Catelyn going, Robb has learned a lot of lessons from his father Ned. I hope he learned enough. I hope that he didn't learn too much from Ned, because you don't want to take too many political lessons from someone who's literally currently now, currently rotting in a dungeon of King's Landing accused of treason. Maybe, just maybe, Ned isn't the best model of how to handle political situations like this. So Robb might be better off not taking too many leaves out of Ned Stark's book. Do you think there are Weirwood leaves in Ned Stark's book? I would imagine so. But anyway, yeah, don't pay too close attention to Ned. But also don't pay too much attention to Catelyn, because Catelyn's the one who bloody dwarf napped her way into this war in the first place. So Robb's hasn't got great political role models available to him. Neither Ned nor Cat are completely dumb, but they're not the most powerful political role models to have. Hodor would be a much better role model, I think. He should follow Hodor's sage wisdom, sage advice. Alright, so Robb's like, alright, we've got to cross this somehow. We've got to find a way across the bridge. How are we going to do it? Brynden Tully turns up, and he brings the news that there's been a battle under the walls of River Run. Jaime Lannister destroyed Edmure's army, and the Lords of the Trident are reeling, and they're like, whoa, shit, Jaime sure killed our blokes pretty good. And Edmure has been captured. Catelyn's brother Edmure Tully has been captured, and he remains captured. He remains prisoner for about 3 more books now, about 4 more books until Feast and the whole business with Game of Thrones season 6 and all that. Edmure has a pretty rough time of it. Everyone likes to put shit on Edmure because, he's not as competent as the Blackfish. He's not as handsome as Jaime Lannister. He's not as Hodor. But we've all got to acknowledge that Edmure has a pretty unpleasant time of this series in the capture of the Lannisters and the Freys, all bloody books. But yes, things have gone badly for the Tullys of the Riverlands, and Edmure has been captured. And so Robb's like, well, shit, that's all the more reason that we've got to cross this bridge and get into the Riverlands to support the Tullys and fight the Lannisters. We gotta go sort this shit out. And Rob's like, oh, I'll bloody destroy his castle, like Theon suggests. I'll just go and attack, and I'll just fight my way through if I have to. But Catelyn's like, don't be a child about it. That's not a good solution to this problem. We've got to find some smart political way to make some kind of deal to get through. And Catelyn basically says that, look, Walder Frey, he's going to want something. He's going to want something for him. He's self-interested, he's going to want to trade, he's going to want to get something in return for letting us across the bridge. And so Rob's like, well, what does he want? And Catelyn's like, all right, well, we've got to ask him. We've got to find out. We've got to offer some kind of a trade. We've got to make some kind of a deal happen. We need a deal maker. The art of the deal. The cat of the Walder, the art of the fray, the art of the crossing. There's a joke there. Let's work out how we can cross this bridge. And yeah, again, Catelyn reflects on like, I hope that Rob has internalized all the lessons that Ned has taught him. I hope that he knows wisdom as well as valor. I hope you taught him to kneel. Because the graveyards of the Seven Kingdoms are full of brave men who never learned to kneel. Kneeling is, of course, a great tradition in the North, because there was that bloke Torrhen Stark, the king who knelt, who 300 years ago knelt to Aegon Targaryen and said, all right, we surrender, because you know what? I don't think we can fight a giant army with 3 dragons and the combined forces of like 4 of the Seven Kingdoms. I don't think the North should fight that fight, because we will almost certainly fail. Therefore, the Northerners do need to sometimes be smart enough to kneel. Bit of carpet burns on the old kneecaps is what the Northerners need to develop sometimes. So Catelyn hopes that Rob realizes that sometimes you got to get down and go. You just got to get down on your knees and just go for it. Sometimes you have to. And so they describe the twins, they describe the castle. So it's a big-ass bridge across a big-ass river. There's a tower on each side, or like a castle on each side, which are called the twins because they're identical. They're like Jaime and Cersei. They're just these little twins. And there's also a tower in like the middle of the bridge, and it took 3 generations for the Freys to complete their bridge. And they've grown rich off the coin that people pay them to let them across. Which they don't really look at in the show, do they? I mean, they don't look quote unquote rich. I mean, have you seen their hats? Like, it's hilarious, the outfits that the Freys all wear in the show, because they got those funny little caps, like those little brown leather sort of cap hat things, which doesn't look like the sort of hat that you'd wear if you were rich. I wouldn't know, I suppose, but you got it. I mean, I'd imagine some kind of feathered thing with like a nice brim and like a little buckle in the middle. That's the sort of hat that you'd wear if you had grown rich off the taxes of people crossing your bridge. But the Freys in the show just wear all these sort of drab browns. It looks like Yeezy season 3. It's ridiculous. Well, yeah, I guess that is rich people clothes, isn't it? Kanye likes dull browns and funny hats, so maybe the Freys are just following his example anachronistically. Maybe Kanye copied the Frey fashion. He plagiarized Frey fashion for his Yeezy season. Maybe that's what's going on here in terms of fashion. We need like a fashion corner in Alt Swift X, don't we? Need like a theme song for fashion time, fashion 5 minutes. That'd be great. Anyway, so there's this big ass bridge and they want to cross it. There's these castles, and the castles are very well defended. So there's all these spears and swords and scorpions and castles and murder holes and blah blah, and it's super well fortified. So the Great John and the Karstarks and the Boltons are all like, yeah, we can't fight our way through that. That's too well fortified. It'd be a massive pain in the ass to try and get through there. And it's interesting that each of Rob's different bannermen have a different reaction to seeing the castle. So the Great John swears, and Rickard Karstark glowers in silence, and Roose Bolton announces that cannot be assaulted, my lords. Roose Bolton says, which feels slightly like out of character. I would say, I mean, loudly stating the obvious doesn't really seem to be Roose Bolton's usual sort of trademark, usual sort of modus operandi. But here we are, Roose Bolton loudly saying, that rock sure looks stony. I mean, that's like the equivalent of what he's saying here with, like, the twins can't be the sun sure is warm. The ocean sure is wet. That's like the equivalent of saying the twins sure look well fortified, which, yeah, is unusual, because Roose Bolton's meant to be this creepy motherfucker, right? Like, Roose Bolton's meant to be like, he speaks very quietly, and he has strange, pale eyes, and he is cold. Like, that's what Roose Bolton's meant to be like, but here he's like, that tree sure is leafy, Rob. I think you'd better consider its chlorophyll content before you attempt to smoke it. Like, that's what Roose is doing. It's ridiculous. It's a ruse indeed, Rusty. Anyway, so yeah, and Helmund Tallheart is also there. The Tallheart's one of the most underrepresented houses in the books and show, I would say. And then a Sallyport opens. A Sallyport. Apparently that's like a little hatch on the side of a castle. A Sallyport. Sallyport would be a great name for someone. I think my daughter is called Sallyport, actually. First name Sally, last name Port. Middle name Clemenstria, actually. Sally Clemenstria Port. She's real proud of her. Real proud of her. She's studying at the University of Cancun. And she's got 2 PhDs in the same subject. Actually, she's an academic interested in specifically the physics of bees. Because you know how at the start of the bee movie, the Bee's Life movie. Remember how I had that quote about how fun fact? Did you know that bumblebees actually aren't real? They're not real, and like goats, they follow a different kind of physics. When my daughter Sally saw that movie, she was inspired to pursue an academic career investigating the precise nature of the physics of bees. So mostly what she does is she weighs the bees to determine their exact density and their mass, and then she grinds them up into a powder, and she snorts them, and then writes notes on the sort of physiological experience of having snorted the bees and exactly what kind of effects she experiences as a result of bee huffing. Sally calls them bee huffing. My daughter Sally is a passionate bee huffer. So yeah, that's my daughter Sally. But in the story, the Sallyport opens, and out of Sallyport, man, this is so much more uncomfortable now that my daughter's been roped into it. The Sallyport opens, and from within the Sallyport, a dozen knights ride forth. I've never seen a dozen knights ride out of my daughter, and I hope I never will. But the dozen knights ride out of the twins, and they are led by 4 of Lord Walder's many sons. There's Stevron Frey, there's a bunch of other Freys. The Freys, by the way, all look like weasels. Which is a bit rude, isn't it? It's funny how George Martin, on the one hand, is constantly asking you to sort of, question whether people's group affiliations determine the sort of person they are. George Martin's writing is all about how, individuals are complex, layered human characters within whatever their culture is or whatever their group is. But at the same time, he does insist that all Freys look like weasels, which is kind of like, really? And most of them act like weasels, let's be honest. The Freys are generally pricks. Not all of them, but most of them. So, question the genetics there. But that's the reality of it. They all look like weasels. And so Stevron, who is Lord Walder's heir, he's 60 years old. He's been waiting a long time for Walder to die so that he can take over, but it's yet to happen. And Stevron Frey rides up, And yes, and as Gary Noir quotes, one of the best quotes in The Simpsons is when Homer says that weaseling out of things what's the exact quote? I think it's slightly different to that, but Homer says something like weaseling out of things is great, it's important, it's because weaseling out of things is what separates us from the animals, well, except for the weasel. The Simpsons. You might have heard of that show. It's actually quite good. There are actually some good episodes in that show. Very little known, very obscure television program, The Simpsons, from a country called, you might have heard of, called the United Americans or something. There's this country somewhere out west of somewhere. You might have heard of it. It's worth visiting sometime. And so the Knights of the Freys ride out of My Daughter, and Stevron Frey comes up to Robb Stark and the group of the Northerners, and he's like, "Who's in charge here?" And Robb Stark steps up and he's like, "I'm in charge here." And Stevron Frey has a little giggle. He has a little giggle because it's a 15-year-old leading this Northern army, and you would have a little giggle because it is slightly ridiculous that this boy, that this barely even a teenager, is leading this supposed giant Northern army. And so he's somewhat amused, but at the same time, his horse, he's not amused. His horse is concerned about the direwolf situation. There is one more direwolf than this horse is comfortable with having in the vicinity, because this direwolf, Greywind, Robb's direwolf, is present, and horses do not like it. Direwolves hate this. Horses hate this. What are those pop-up ads where it's like, doctors hate this. One easy trick to make your face look like your butt and your butt look like your face. Whoa, click here. Like, that's what you see on all of the ads on like the BuzzFeeds or whatever, don't you? Whoa, 5 cool facts that horses hate to make your direwolf super shiny. Like, that's... yeah. Anyway, so the Freys are like, "Yo, Robb Stark, come and hang out. Come into the Twins, this super fortified fortress that's held by Walder Frey, who no one trusts. Come on in. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be chilled. It's gonna be sweet. Come and have a little Frey party. Just because we look like weasels doesn't mean we don't know how to have a good time. You know what they're like. The show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That's a show in a place also in America. And who are those weird family, that weird family in It's Always Sunny, who are like just the total weirdos who look like weasels? They're called like the McFluggins or something, the McDuggans, someone help me out in the comments. The family who are weird in It's Always Sunny. Someone must know. The O'Boyles, is that it? O'Doyles. They're like the phrase. Yeah, McPoyles. The McPoyles are like the phrase of that particular program. Because they all look weird. They all act weird. They're like this endlessly large family of like inbred weirdos. And they are foils to our protagonists. And they also guard bridges. The phrase equal the McPoyles confirmed. And so Robb is invited to hang out with the McPoyles in their party mansion. And then Robb is like, I think maybe I shouldn't. Like, I think maybe I shouldn't trust the hospitality of the McPoyles. I don't want to sit around drinking milk with Walder Frey all afternoon. Because, A, I don't like milk, but B, he might kill me. I feel like he might kill me. So all the Bannermen warn Robb. And if you go alone into the Twins, Walder could just give you to the Lannisters, or he could just cut your throat or throw you in a dungeon, and we don't trust Walder, so you better not do it. And so they're like, well, all right, well, if that's all the Freys are going to allow, like, we've got to do something. Someone's got to go in there and talk to the Freys, and so Catelyn is like, you know what? I'll do it. I'll go in. I'll have a chat. It's too dangerous to let Robb in, but we've got to let someone important in, someone who's close to Robb, some kind of important negotiator, political machinator. So Catelyn will go in and chat. And so everyone else is like, are you sure? Are you going to be safe? Are you going to be cool? And Catelyn's like, no, it's all G, all good, I'll go in. And she walks up to the Twins, and she doesn't look back. for fear of turning into a pillar of salt. Was it because there was Lot in the Bible, and then there was also that other bloke in Greek mythology who went down into the underworld? Because I think there was some bloke in Greek mythology who really he had a partner who he loved very much, and she died, I think. And then he decided, you know what, I love her so much, I'm going to go into the underworld and pull her back out. It'll be great. And so he went down into Hades or the underworld or wherever, and he found his love, and he grabbed her and pulled her, and he just decided to leave out of the underworld. But like the rule was, Orpheus, that's the one. And Orpheus tried to leave the underworld with his mate, but the rule was that you can't look back into the underworld while you're leaving, or else you'll turn into a pillar of salt, or you'll be forced to stay there or something. I'm getting confused with a lot. I'm not sure which one's which. But both are terrifying. Yeah, Rusty, turning into a pillar of salt is fucking terrifying. First of all, because, it's presumably like death, to some extent, by some meaning. But on the other hand, why a pillar of salt? What does that even mean? What does it mean to turn into a pillar of salt? What does that feel like? What does that taste like? Can you imagine what it would taste like to turn into a pillar of salt? Do you think, would it start from your legs and move upwards, turning into salt, or would it be everywhere instantaneously? Would you taste your saltiness while you're turning into a pillar of salt? That's all I'd like to know. And I hope that I never find out. But, I think we're getting Orpheus and Lot confused. But in any case, Catelyn does not look back. She does not want to suffer the fate of Orpheus or of Lot or of Lot's wife or any of those people. And so she walks into the twins and she does not look back. And so she thinks about Walder Frey. She thinks about all of his sons, all of his grandsons, all of his grand bastards. Wouldn't it be great being a grand bastard? That's such a great contradiction of a name, isn't it? Because bastard suggests someone low in social status, someone unwanted, something negative, whereas grand implies something significant and positive. Being a grand bastard is like being scum deluxe. It's like being the highest of the low. It's like being the king of the rats, the rat king, scum deluxe, grand bastard. That's pretty good. And so Lord Walder, Catelyn comes into the twins and she meets Lord Walder, who is 90 years old, which is very bloody old for a feudal medieval society. And he's 90 years old and he looks like a wizened pink weasel. So all the Freys look like weasels, but Walder looks like a wizened pink weasel, which is like the best variety of weasel. He's like a shiny Pokemon. He's like a shiny Weaselmon. All the Freys look like regular old weasels, but Walder is a special Pokemon, and he's shiny and pink because he's a special shiny Weaselmon. And he's got his newest wife, a pale, frail girl of 16. So, of course, there's that profound discomfort of this 90-year-old lecherous old man married to a teenage girl. And Walder, by the way, is too old to be able to walk anymore, so he's carried around in a litter. Like, who are those frog people who are in the slan? Who are the old the psychic frogs who have to get carried around? The big fat psychic frogs who are carried. Someone will know in the comments, but Walder Frey is like one of them, the slan, the sleeth or something. And so Walder's old and gross and he's a pink weasel, and Catelyn comes in and says, "Oh, it is such a great pleasure to see you again, Mr. Lord Walder, sir. Such a great pleasure to see your pink weaselly face again. Oh, how I missed your weasality. How wonderful." And then Walder's like, "Spare me your fucking courtesies. I have no interest. I'm too old. I'm 90 years old. You know how many asses I've had to kiss in order to survive this long? Like, I have no interest in your courtesies." And Catelyn's like, "Oh, but, I had known you as a girl, and when I was in the Riverlands, and you were a Lord Walder, and, we've got so much history, you and I. We've been best buds for life. BFFs forever. Catelyn and Frey. Catelyn and Walder. It's great." And Walder's like, he's got no time for it. So Walder is described as irascible, sharp of tongue, and blunt of manner. A bit of a contradiction that his tongue is sharp, but his manner is blunt. You'd think those two things might sort of even each other out or something, but apparently not. He's got a sharp tongue and a blunt manner. You wouldn't want to cut your manner on your, yes, the slan. That was what I was thinking of, Anagi. An even nerdier reference than the Hypnotoad. The slan. Anyway, and so she's in the twins and she's having a chat, and in a sort of hilarious scene that they captured quite well in the show, Walder is chastised by some of his bastards and some of his sons, who are saying, "Hey Walder, you 90-year-old irascible cunt, how about you not be so rude to our guests?" And then Walder is like, "I'm 90 fucking years old, and I have no patience for your bullshit, and if I hadn't squirted you into the belly of a milkmaid, you wouldn't even exist, you grand bastard son of a weasel." And then he goes, "Oh." So Walder does quite a good job of smacking down his various progeny when they question his rudeness. And so that happens. "You bastards my bastards presume to teach me courtesy. I'll speak any way I like, damn you." There are quite a lot of great old people in Game of Thrones who have no time for anyone's bullshit. Olenna is the same. I'd love to see a conversation between Walder Frey and Olenna Tyrell, because Olenna has no time for anyone's bullshit, and neither does Walder. When you've lived a certain number of decades, you run out of patience for other people's bullshit. And so Walder Frey is carried out on his little slan litter, and they take him out to the high seat of the Freys. They're really enthusiastic about chairs in the Game of Thrones books. That not so much represented in the show, but in the books, Walder Frey has the high seat of the Freys, which is a tall chair of black oak, which is carved in the shape of two towers linked by a bridge. How cute. And then Walder plants a papery dry kiss on Catelyn's hand, which doesn't sound very pleasant, but it's probably better than a moist kiss. We've seen some moist kisses in this series before, and that's even worse than a papery dry kiss. And so Catelyn turns up and says, "Alright, fine, you want to know what I'm after, you want to know the truth, I want to cross your bridge. Me and my blokes, me and my son, me and my army, we want to cross your bridge. Are you going to let us across, or are you going to be a bridge troll who demands a toll?" The fact that troll rhymes with toll is a gift to bridge-based rappers everywhere. And so Catelyn's like, "And by the way, you really should have been, helping my brother at River Run, seeing as you're sworn to him. It'd be nice if you actually, did your job, mate, you little Waldery weasel." And Walder was like, "Oh, I was gonna get there, I was on my way. I was gonna turn up to River Run to help with the fight, but, I just wanted to get my strength together before I left, I just wanted to, gather my swords and get my shit together and compose myself and organize myself, because you know that I enjoy planning. I'm a man with a plan, and I carefully itemize my priorities. I use SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, retractable, truncated goals are what I use, because I believe in careful planning and forethought." That's what Walder says. And so he's like, "That's the reason why I didn't turn up at River Run. It's because I had to sort out my shit first. And I was gonna come help. I promise. I was gonna risk my soldiers. I was gonna risk my life to protect you. That was my intention. I promise." And then Walder's like, "Yeah, tell them that was my intention." So all of his bastards go, "Oh yes, we had every intention of going and joining the battle. Every intention. We were going to do it. It was going to be great." But the obvious undertone here is that Walder had little to no actual intention of joining in the fight, and Walder wanted to preserve his own soldiers. He didn't want to risk anything by actually joining the fight against the Lannisters. Yeah, Walder complains, Is it my fault that your stupid brother Edmure lost the battle before I could even turn up? Blame that on Edmure's incompetency, not my tardiness. Stop tard-shaming me," says Walder. Everyone's trying to tard-shame Walder just because he's late sometimes. So that's not good. Anyway, so And so Catelyn has some violent thoughts in the books, by the way. Catelyn in the show, from the outside, you can't really tell how her violent thoughts that she has. But here she thinks that she would gladly have spitted the querulous old man and roasted him over a fire. Catelyn Stark thinks, wow, I would kind of like to kill Walder Frey, which is kind of brutal. I mean, roasted weasel wouldn't even taste all that good, I'd imagine. He's a little pink wizened weasel man, a 90-year-old man. I don't think he's got a lot of good meat on him. I don't think he'd taste that good if you roasted him, but still Catelyn considers it. I suppose that's just a food description. Isn't it? That's just George Martin feeling obliged to sneak another food description into this chapter, and so the way he decided to put it in was by describing roasted Frey, roasted weasel, delicious. And so Catelyn's like, all right, can we go and talk privately? And Catelyn's like, and Frey's like, oh, we're talking already. He's just so annoying, Walder is. And Walder's like, all right, fine, you want to speak in private. So instead of moving to somewhere private, all of his gathered family and children and supporters and stuff, he just says, all right, all of you, get out. All of you grand bastards, all of you little weasels, all you big weasels, scamper away. Little weasel kin, get out of here. So they all leave. I don't know why Walder's Australian now, but he is. And then also Walder makes a gross joke that maybe Catelyn wants to bang Walder. Maybe that's why she wants privacy. So Walder is annoying and gross, is all you really need to know. And he says, heh. Walder in the books says heh a lot. It's like Gollum's Gollum, you know, like in the Lord of the Rings books, more so than in the movies, but in the books Gollum says like Gollum, like he has this weird noise, this like tick, this like what's the term? Tourette's. He's got like a Tourette's sort of a tick where he goes Gollum every now and then. And Walder Frey likes to go heh, which is fun. And so once everyone files out, Walder Frey complains about how everyone's waiting for me to die. I'm 90 years old, I'm the Lord of the Twins, and everyone's waiting for me to die so that Stevron can inherit the twins and get all the power. But of course all of the other brothers and all of the other children are vying for power, and Stevron of course gets murdered at some point. And so they're all vying to inherit Walder's lordship, but just to annoy them all, he's clinging on to life and refusing to die. And there is indeed a Gollum parallel. Indeed, David Kovalev. Gollum is a big fan of eating fish, and Catelyn is a fish, and she is walking into Gollum's lair here. And so basically, once everyone's out, Catelyn's like, "All right, fine. I want to cross. I want to cross the bridge." And then Walder's like, "Oh, that's blunt of you to put it like that." Which is the pot calling the kettle blunt in this case. And Walder's like, look, you know, why should I let you cross? You've got 20,000 men, sure, but they're going to be 20,000 corpses when they get killed by Tywin Lannister. And, you know, you guys aren't exactly the good guys in this situation, far as I'm concerned, because Ned Stark is a traitor locked under the Red Keep. And, you know, Hoster Tully, your father, is sick, so I don't really want to worry about him. Jaime Lannister's just got your brother in the jail. Like, why should I help you? You guys seem like the bad guys in this situation. What do I get out of it? And Catelyn's like, well, you swore an oath to support my father Hoster. You're sworn to the Tullys. But Walder says, well, I've sworn a lot of things. I make a lot of oaths. I say a lot of things. I don't have to do all of them, do I? But he also points out that he swore an oath to support the king, Joffrey. And it seems to him that the Starks are traitors to the crown. With all the Ned Stark and the Robb Stark, it's all traitory. So he figures he better support Joffrey instead and keep his oath to Joffrey and not help the Starks. And then we have this long bit of Walder complaining about how Tywin Lannister annoys him, because Tywin is so proud and mighty, and he's a lion, and he's haughty, and he's I'm Tywin Lannister, look at me, I have sideburns that are golden, and I have a bald head, and I did the defiance of the Duskendale, and I shit gold, look at me, Tywin Lannister. But Walder Frey argues that I'll wager you, when he eats too many beans, he breaks wind just like the rest of us. And that is an actual quote, just to be clear. Walder Frey talks about beans and flatulence, and that is why this series is an abridged series. I mean, technically, admittedly, I think it's longer than the actual audiobooks, but it's abridged in the sense that we skip things so that we can make room for more important things like tangents about goats. And so Walder complains about how Tywin's so high and mighty. And then Walder talks about his wife a lot, his little 16-year-old wife, and how he wants to father some more sons on her. He just sort of goes on, and he complains about Hoster Tully. He complains about how Hoster Tully didn't come to any of his marriages. Your family has always pissed on me. So Walder is very much aggrieved over a bunch of slights on his pride that he has. He's nursing a lot of grievances, is Walder Frey. And so he goes on and on about how no one respects him and no one treats him properly. People shame him. And he goes on and on and on and about how his sons got beaten in a tourney once, and he talks about how he tried to take John little sweet Robin Arryn as a ward, but he was refused because Lysa Arryn doesn't like anyone taking her little sweet Robin. But we also have another mention of this funny little controversy where like Catelyn is like, oh, I thought that sweet Robin was going to be fostered with Tywin at Castle Rock, but then Walder was like, no, the plan is to actually foster sweet Robin with Stannis at Dragonstone. So that's one of these funny little subplots that never quite gets totally clarified what was actually going on there, but it seems to be something potentially significant, what with Jon Arryn and Littlefinger and sweet Robin and Lysa and all of that shenanigans. So there's an interesting plot knot there. But yeah, Walder calls Tywin a bunghole who thinks he's too noble to shit. And Walder goes on and on and on about all of his grievances. And eventually they get down to business and they have a bit of a haggle. Not a huddle, not a huggle, but a haggle. Catelyn, the fish, and Walder, the bridge, have a bit of commerce chat, and they decide, don't make fun of the way I say controversy. And they have a bit of a haggle over what kind of a deal they're going to make, the art of the deal, how they're going to work out how to cross the bridge. And Catelyn Stark emerges from the twins. She emerges from my daughter Sally Port again, with a bunch of the Freys, and she announces that it is done, it's agreed, and Lord Walder will give you crossing. He's going to let you go across the bridge, and all you have to do in return is agree with his demands. And what does he want from us? Well, his demands are as follows. 1. You need to escort a couple of Lord Frey's grandsons to Winterfell, where they will be fostered as wards. So that's they're both called Walder, by the way, because all the Freys, all the Weasels name each other Walder in order to try and get favor out of the big pink Walder himself, the shiny Walder. And these wards are both called Walder, are Little Walder Frey and Big Walder Frey. And so Catelyn notes that, Bran will really appreciate the company of some boys around his age. Although, of course, sadly, the irony is that Little Walder Frey and Big Walder Frey are kind of dickheads, and they bully Bran. Poor little crippled Bran gets bullied by Little Walder and Big Walder, so that doesn't go so well. And then the next condition is that Robb Stark needs to take Frey's son Olyvar Frey as a squire. So Robb's like, okay, yeah, whatever, I'll take a squire, that's fine. The third condition is that Arya Stark, after the war's over, will have to marry Elmar Frey, Lord Walder's youngest son, when they both come of age. And Robb's like, wow, Arya will not like the prospect of having to marry some Frey weasel. But one of the funny little tidbits, actually, is that Arya, when she's at Harrenhal, I believe, actually meets Elmar Frey. And neither of them know who the other is. But little do they know they've been promised to each other, and they meet each other, not knowing the little potential husband and wife, supposedly, the marriage that never was to be. They meet each other later on in Storm, I think. And then the final condition, the most unpleasant and difficult condition for Robb, is that after the war's over, Robb will have to marry one of Walder Frey's daughters. And Walder has kindly allowed Robb to choose which of his daughters to marry, but Robb will nonetheless have to join will have to marry one of Walder's daughters. And so Robb's like, I'd rather not marry a weasel. If I had to choose, I'd rather not marry a weasel. People keep making fun of the Arya pronunciation. We've got an Arya pronunciation controversy. We've got an Arya pronunciation controversy. We've got an Arya pronunciation controversy. It's tricky. Anyway, so those are the conditions, and Robb Stark goes, all right, I don't really want to marry one of Walder Frey's daughters, but I've got to cross this bridge. I got to work it out. So you know what? Okay, fine. I consent. I will marry one of Walder Frey's daughters, and that of course ends up sort of being Robb's downfall, because he breaks his agreement with Walder Frey, and in the end he marries Jane Westerling, or Talisa Magyar in the show, and breaks the deal with Walder, and that's part of why Walder does the Red Wedding and Robb dies. So this is kind of the moment where Robb seals his fate, and screws himself over. But at the time, Catelyn's quite impressed. Catelyn's like, wow, look, Robb's being a man, Robb's being responsible, he's doing something he doesn't want to have to do, he's making an agreement for the good of the army and the good of the war and the good of the politics, so it's all gonna be okay. And so they make the deal and they cross the bridge. And their host is like a great steel snake crossing the bridge, and they head across, and it's time for a war fight party soon. And so Robb crosses the bridge with the majority of the forces, while a minority of the forces, led by Roose Bolton, stay behind to basically distract Tywin Lannister, while the real force goes and kicks Jaime's ass in the Battle of the Whispering Woods. So that actually works out quite good in a military sense, even though Roose Bolton actually screws Robb over by doing various shenanigans involving sending people into the meat grinder at Duskendale and stuff like that. Roose actually undermines the Northern cause from quite an early stage. But anyway, Robb doesn't know that yet, and Catelyn thinks, well, for good or ill, she doesn't know the outcomes yet. She hasn't read the spoilers. Catelyn thinks, for good or ill, my son Robb has thrown the dice. He's made his decision, and now we'll see where things land, and we'll see how things turn out in the future. So that was episode 60 of Game of Thrones Abridged on Alt Swift X. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you go and check out some of the lovely little communities that are developed around the Alt Swift X Discord and the Facebook. That was quite a funny episode around the Facebook, actually. I think some of the people in the Facebook mistook the Alt Swift X Facebook group for some kind of a Game of Thrones role-playing group, because certain individuals were usurped from the Facebook page. Yes, Stephanie was the great Machiavellian political player who managed to wrest control of the Swift group from. It was like the Ides of March. It was like the stabbing of Jon Snow, the Lord Commander. It was kind of amazing, but I'll let you discover that saga in the Facebook group. And yes, Ricky, of course, as Kata reminds, Ricky was also instrumental in returning the Lord Commander back to his post in the Facebook group. So some pretty hilarious shenanigans going down. Really lovely communities in both Discord and in the Facebook. There's also a subreddit. I keep mentioning the subreddit in the hope that maybe someone will freshen up the subreddit with some new posts that maybe push the existing posts off the front page. Maybe that's something that could happen on the subreddit, but we'll see how that goes. Anyway, we've been going for well over an hour. I think it's more than time to wrap up, but thank you all for joining in the live stream. Thank you all for all the lovely things you're doing on the various communities, and we will have some more Swift episodes soon. The goal kind of is to finish book 1 before Game of Thrones season 7. I think in order to do it at this point, we'd have to do like an episode every day for the next 2 weeks. I don't think that's going to happen. Maybe we'll do some ridiculous marathon or something. But I don't know, maybe we won't finish the book in time. We'll see how it goes. The schedule is supposedly 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's still the schedule, theoretically. Sometimes we are a little bit off it one way or another, but we'll try and stick to that. Anyway, thank you all for joining. Have a lovely day, and see y'all next time. Cheers. Oh, and yes, also, thank you once again to Mr. or Mrs. Gender Neutral Shrimp 99991. So Shrimp's comment was, "Hi, I like you, smiley face." Well, Shrimp 99991, I like you too. Thank you very much for your kind donation. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you have a lovely seafood-based day, and I hope you don't get caught and put into any kind of delicious meal with lemon and salad and some extra little bits. So enjoy your shrimpiness. It's really a marine life party down here, what with Hairless Oyster. It's like SpongeBob SquarePants. Alt-Shift X is increasingly feeling like a SpongeBob SquarePants episode. So thank you, Oyster. Thank you, Shrimp. Thank you all. Have a lovely week. See ya.